And what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. Alright, I've got a question for you. When was the last time you watched a race that looked incredible on paper, but really didn't deliver once it got going? Because that's kind of where we are right now. We've got one of the most iconic tracks in the world with the Japanese Grand Prix. Yes, we are a week late on this, but this is one we wanted to discuss a little more thoroughly. We also had a weekend at Rockingham that brought back some old school racing feel, an Indy 500 entry list that's right on the edge of something big, or something missing entirely. Somehow all three of these stories connect in the same way, and that's control versus the chaos. Best drivers in the world managing races instead of attacking, while in other series you're still seeing guys fight the track, the tires, and each other every single lap. So today we're going to get into all of it. We'll break down what actually happened in Japan, why people are frustrated with this new era of Formula One, what Rockingham told us across two different series, and then we'll take a look ahead to Indy, because we might be heading toward a year where bump day isn't even guaranteed. And to wrap it up, we're going to go back in time to one of the toughest champions USAC ever saw. This is Historic Hot Laps. Let's get into it. Alright, let's kick it off with Rockingham, right? Let's head right over there because this one actually delivered something we've been missing a bit lately. A dominant performance with just enough late race drama to make it interesting. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series returned to Rockingham Speedway for the Black's Tire 200. And the headline's real simple on this one. Corey Heim absolutely controlled the race. Heim took the win driving the number 1 Toyota for Tricon Garage, leading a staggering 178 of 200 laps and sweeping both the stages. But, and this is what made it worth watching, he nearly gave it away at the end. With just 4 laps to go, Heim started dealing with vibration and steering issues, and suddenly the field had been chasing him all night, finally had a shot. And that's when Caden Honeycutt showed up. However, for most of the race, this wasn't a battle, it was a clinic. Heim checked out early, managed clean air perfectly, never really faced serious challenge, but in the closing laps, everything tightened up pretty fast for him. Honeycutt closed the lap, got to Heim's bumper, and even briefly edged ahead coming to the white flag. Looked like we might get a last lap upset. Instead, Heim leaned on experience and honestly a little bit of racecraft in the traffic to hold him off. He used lap trucks to his advantage, managed to hang on the win by just 0.09 seconds. The finish that made the race feel a lot closer than it actually was. So here's how it finished. Here's your top 10 official results. Corey Heim in first, Caden Honeycutt in second, Lane Riggs came up in third, but actually I believe got a DQ after the fact, so those points don't really matter, which shifts the whole rest of the field to Chandler Smith topping out the podium. Stuart Friesen coming in behind him, Grant Enfinger, Tyler Ankrum, Corey LaJoy. By the way, Corey LaJoy, top 10 finish with that new Dodge program and his new full-time ride after all the other drama we talked about previously. Super solid, super awesome to see. Behind him, you had Ty Majeski and Jake Garcia. This race really had two completely different stories, right? Up front, you had total domination. At the end of it, you had a pure scramble. Heim becomes the first driver this season to score the maximum points in a race, winning both of the stages and the race itself, and continues building momentum early into the year. And don't overlook this either. He's doing it as a part-time driver, which makes it even more impressive and a little frustrating for all the full-time championship contenders. And honestly, the fact that Corey Heim doesn't have a full-time ride this year is criminal, and the system is absolutely broken. That's for another discussion. But Rockingham is old school, tire wear matters, track position matters, and long green flag runs tend to spread the field out. That's exactly what we saw. Once Heim got in control, it was incredibly hard for anyone to touch him. Clean air still matters in these trucks a ton, especially at a place like this, and passing at the front was limited unless something went wrong. Sound kind of familiar, right? It's not as extreme as what we're seeing in Formula One right now, but the same theme is here. The leader controls the race unless something breaks the rhythm. This time, it almost did happen. Leaving Rockingham, here's what we need to watch. Can Corey Heim turn part-time dominance into bigger opportunity across the top series in NASCAR? We know he's kind of in a limbo series right now with all this other stuff going on. He's a development driver for 2311. They don't have enough to do a full-time ride in Cup, but he's going to keep working towards it, right? Is Caden Honeycutt about to break through for his first win? Because the drive said that he was very close this time. More broadly, will Rockingham stay on the schedule long-term? Because this track clearly has something to offer. It's going to get better and better as the pavement wears down. Bottom line, this wasn't the most action-packed race lap to lap, but it did give us a late race twist, pretty dominant performance, and a finish that actually mattered. Staying right there in Rockingham, let's talk about the O'Reilly Series race and what happened over there. So your results are as follows for that one. You had William Sawalich, Brandon Jones, Justin Allgaier taking up your podium there, followed by Caruth, Quapple, Creed, Gray, Retzloff, Sieg, and Corey Day rounding out the top 10. Really, overall, a pretty awesome thing to watch. There was a lot more tire fall off. You had a lot more green flag runs that mattered. Just a lot of good stuff overall. You also had Cletus McFarland making his O'Reilly debut, trying to qualify for Talladega. As far as, the experience points go, he ended up in 32nd, started out in 33rd, 6 laps down, I believe. Not great. Not great, unfortunately, for him. But that's another story for another day, because at the end of this, we saw managing tires mattered more. Moving through the field was more possible, and late race positioning actually felt earned, not just maintained. I mean, we saw a lot of good stuff from this one. Solid old school Rockingham race, not perfect, not chaotic, but competitive, evolving, and just unpredictable enough to keep you watching all the way through. And after this weekend like that, it's pretty clear that Rockingham still works. While we're on this O'Reilly subject, though, let's do touch on the Cletus McFarland thing real quick. It's come out that he did not do well enough to qualify for Talladega in 2 weeks. I know he felt pretty confident in it, but he lost control of the car a couple times. Luckily enough, he was in the back of the pack. Didn't ruin anybody's day, but still super challenging for him, super challenging for all those around him to kind of watch out for what he's got going on. He did do extremely well in the ARCA race, which we did not recap, and that's fine. It is what it is, but he did do really well in that, but that's where he needs to be, and he needs to hone that craft more. We know he can drive, we know he's got car control, but he's just not ready to make all these leaps. Anyway, I'm not going to touch on that a whole lot more. It's going to keep coming up all season long. It's a whole thing, but yeah, that's it for the O'Reilly Series recap. Pretty straightforward. Now let's take a trip across the pond. Let's get into Japan, because this is one worth talking about, not just for what happened, but what it says about Formula One right now. So 2026 Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka Circuit was won by Kimi Antonelli, and honestly, it wasn't particularly close. Antonelli took the win for Mercedes Petronas Formula One with a race time of 1:28.03, finishing 13.7 seconds ahead of Oscar Piastri in the second McLaren. It's good to see McLaren starting to kind of figure stuff out, but they're still ways off the pace. Charles Leclerc brought in the third place, rounding out the podium for Ferrari, just ahead of George Russell in fourth, with Lando Norris rounding out the top 5. So, you had both McLarens, both Mercedes in the top 5, one Ferrari. Lewis Hamilton comes in 6th in the other Ferrari. Pierre Gasly with the Alpine in 7th. Max Verstappen in that Red Bull car in 8th, which is kind of crazy. Liam Lawson in 9th. Esteban Ocon rounds out the points with the Haas entry in 10th, which is also great to see. So Antonelli's the real deal. We know it. This was Antonelli's second win in the season, and more importantly, it pushes him firmly at the center of the championship fight. At just 19 years old, he's now the youngest driver to lead the standings, and he's doing it in a way that looks controlled. There's no chaos, there's no overdriving, just pace. He started on the pole, managed the race from the front, and never really looked threatened. That's impressive, but it also leads to a bigger issue. The race itself was kind of flat. Suzuka is one of the best tracks in the world. It's fast, it's flowing, it's technical. It should produce great racing. But this race definitely did not, and that's becoming quite the pattern, as we've talked about before. But even with different strategies playing out behind the leaders, the reality is this. Once the order's settled, it stayed settled. Dirty air is still a problem. Following closely through high-speed sections like the S's is nearly impossible. The drivers are backing off just to preserve tire and battery deployment from the hybrid system. And you could see it, gaps hovering just outside of the attack range, drivers waiting instead of racing. There were moments where there's some midfield fights, a safety car triggered some retirements, but nothing that really changed the shape of the race up front. And that's all we're really going to focus on, right? So the bigger criticism from this in this era of cars, and this is where the conversation gets loud, the current generation of cars introduced with the goal of improving racing is starting to face serious criticism, and Japan, being the track it is, it definitely did not help their case. The issues people are pointing to are dirty air still dominates, energy management racing, limited overtaking windows, and a predictable race flow. So once the position stabilizes, it's hard to break the pattern. We've seen this before, even the ground effects era, but fans and analysts alike are starting to question whether the regulations have actually improved the racing product or just shifted the problem into a different form. Instead of tire conservation alone, now it's energy deployment, thermal management, and aero sensitivity all layered together. The result is drivers operating below the limit more often than not, and when you're watching Formula One, that's not really what you want. So, I mean, other key storylines with this, Max Verstappen could only manage 8th, continuing a rough start for Red Bull Racing, which is still struggling with balance on that car and consistency. Lewis Hamilton quietly finished in 6th, showing solid pace but not enough to fight for the podium. The midfield continues to compress with Alpine, Haas, and Audi all mixing it up for points. And the one important note, this race was the last before an unexpected break in the calendar due to the ongoing conflict affecting events in the Middle East. Races in that region have been disrupted, forcing a pause in the schedule. That means teams now get time to regroup, develop some upgrades, and possibly reset the competitive order before the next round of racing goes on. So here's what we need to watch going forward, right? Can Antonelli keep this momentum and turn early dominance into a real title run? Will Mercedes stay ahead, or can Ferrari and McLaren close the gap? And maybe the biggest question of all was, will anything change for the racing itself? Because right now, Formula One has speed, it has talent, it has storylines, but it's missing that fight aspect. But, I mean, yeah, that's your Japan recap, I guess, in short form. But after Japan, the natural question is, what kind of season are we actually in for? Because if Suzuka is any indication of it, this current generation of Formula One cars is heading towards a very specific kind of championship fight, and not everyone's going to love it. Let's be honest about what we're seeing here. Right now, the 2026 regulations have created cars that are incredibly efficient, incredibly fast in clean air, and extremely difficult to race closely. That combination matters more than anything else. What it means in practice is simple. Track position is literally everything with these cars. If you qualify up front, you control the race. If you don't, you're relying on strategy, mistakes, or a big pace advantage just to move forward, and we know that's not going to happen with a lot of these cars. As the field gets tighter, those advantages are harder to come by. Short answer for this, are we heading for a flat season? Well, yeah, it's possible. Not because there's no competition, but because the competition might not translate into on-track battles. We're more likely to see more races decided on Saturday than Sunday. Fewer genuine overtakes, gaps stabilizing quickly after pit cycles, strategy becoming the main action element, which is never a good thing. Japan was a perfect example of this. The top 5 drivers were all quick, the margins were massive, but the race still felt controlled rather than contested, and that's the risk with this rule set. But let's spin this just a little bit. It's not all negative. Here's the other side of it, and it is important. Even if the racing looks kind of a processal at times, the championship itself could still be tight. You've got Kimi Antonelli emerging as a genuine title contender. You've got Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris consistently scoring now, working their way up in the points. Charles Leclerc and George Russell are right there in the mix. If those 5 stay within range of each other, the points table could stay close even without dramatic wheel-to-wheel moments every single weekend. So instead of a runaway season, you might get a tight but quiet fight where consistency beats the brilliance. So where are the rules hurting us? Let's just cover that real quick. Because the biggest issue isn't the speed, it's how the cars behave in traffic, and these cars lose performance quickly when they're following, they overheat tires and energy systems when stuck behind another car, and they struggle through high-speed corners and dirty air. Tracks like Suzuka expose that more than anywhere else, so drivers back off, they manage, they wait. That's smart racing, but it doesn't always make for exciting product on track, right? Something fun to watch. And when you layer the complexity of the hybrid system and energy deployment into it, it becomes less about attacking every lap and more about picking very specific moments. The season isn't locked in yet. A few things could still shake it up. You could still get some development upgrades, circuit variety, weather, reliability swings. I mean, don't forget, we're heading in a short break in the calendar due to the ongoing situation affecting the races in the Middle East. That pause might actually matter more than usual. It gives teams the time to regroup like we talked about. They can rethink their steps, potentially bring meaningful upgrades, but bottom line, this probably won't be a chaotic, highlight reel heavy season. It also doesn't have to be boring. It's shaping up to be a season where precision matters more than aggression. Saturdays carry more weight than Sundays. As we say in the NASCAR and other worlds, off the truck matters more than during the race. And the title fight could come down to who makes the fewest mistakes. If you're looking for constant overtakes, this rule set might frustrate you. If you're into a technical battle, the strategy layer, and watching a championship unfold week by week, there's still a lot of opportunity here. The question is whether Formula One can find a way to bring those two things back together, narrow that margin a little bit, because right now, it just all feels a little too far apart. Alright, normally we'd cover a bunch of news stories right now, right? But we want to cover something because it's coming up in a month. We're 50 days away, 49, 48, I don't even remember, but more than 40, less than 50 days away as we record this. Let's reset this and get into this the right way, because this year's Indianapolis 500 entry situation is actually shaping up to be one of the more interesting things that we've had in a few seasons, and all comes down to one thing. Are we getting 34 cars or not? As of right now, we do have confirmed part-time and Indy-only efforts that push the grid close to that number, but not comfortably over it. The biggest confirmed one-off entry comes from Dreyer Reinbold Racing, once again fielding 2 cars. You've got Connor Daly and Jack Harvey running over there. That's a known, stable Indy-only program. At this point, both drivers bring real experience at the Speedway. Then you've got Ed Carpenter running again, where Ed Carpenter is again expected to run oval-only entry alongside the team's full-time cars. He'll drive that number 33 Chevrolet. This is basically a yearly constant. Still one of the best qualifiers at Indy. Another key addition, Ryan Hunter Ray running the 4th McLaren entry to field the car that Larson attempted with last year. This, however, is not a Hendrick program, but a solid entry regardless. You've got Takuma Sato. He's confirmed with RLL. An additional entry there again. Sato at Indy is never just another car in the field. He's aggressive, unpredictable, and already a 2-time winner. Then there's Meyer Shank, which is expected to expand its 3rd car program to Helio Castroneves. They did make that announcement, returning once again for the Drive for 5 effort. At this point, it almost wouldn't feel like Indy without Castroneves as part of the story. So let's talk about some outliers, though, because Abel Motorsports and Jacob Abel, as there's quiet paddock talk about one additional smaller team entry possibly coming in late, nothing concrete. That's got to be Jacob Abel and Abel Motorsports. And that's the key, because this year feels like it's coming down to a one-time decision. And we don't know what Prem is doing still. We expect him at Long Beach, like they were saying in the offseason, but are they going to make 2-fold entries into Indy? Because that's a lot of resources, and we don't know what they have right now. I mean, question being, will we actually get a bump day? Right now, we're sitting right at the bubble. If everything currently shows up, we land somewhere right at 33 cars, right? If another late entry like Abel or somebody commits, we get 34, then we get a true bump day. But if not, everyone makes the race, and that's a huge difference. And that's kind of upsetting as a purist to the sport, right? So why this is a bigger deal than it sounds? Well, bump day isn't just tradition. It's fundamentally changing how teams approach qualifying. If there are more than 33 cars, then there's a real risk. Runs actually matter beyond positioning. Smaller teams have everything on the line. And if there are exactly 33 entries, well, then qualifying becomes about order, not survival. Still intense, still fast, but it's not the same. There's no threat that you're not going to make the race, right? I mean, look at us last week. Had that number 25 entry shown up for the O'Reilly race, who knows if Cletus McFarland, the social media star, had even ran good enough to qualify for that race. He might have not even made it after all the hype. That's why this kind of stuff matters, and entry orders matter. So the reason we're having this conversation comes down to how difficult it is now to field an Indy 500 entry. The costs are higher, the technical demands are through the roof, and the competitive bar is currently just so steep. Programs like Dreyer and Reinbold are the exception, not the rule, and we'll see what happens when we do a chassis swap at some point with them. They're running on old stock, old cars. We've had this car around for a long time, but that's another huge investment for them. So 2027, 2028 Indy, I mean, we'll see what happens, right? So getting that 34th car isn't just automatic anymore. It has to be built, funded, and justified. Bottom line is, though, we've got a strong field with a mixture of veterans, specialists, and full-time contenders. That's exactly what you want for a good Indy 500 race, but we were right on the edge of having enough cars to have an actual bump day. One confirmed entry will change everything, and as of now, we're still waiting on that final piece. So we'll keep watching the entry list, because this year, more than most, it's going to matter. And if we get to 34, you'll feel it immediately. I know I will. I mean, last year, I went just for bump day. I didn't even go to the race because I didn't have the scheduling that worked out for it, but I went to make sure I saw bump day, and I'm glad I did. But if that's not even a thing this year, that's going to be incredibly unfortunate for really everyone who puts that on the line, and most of all the fans, right? So we'll keep watching it. We'll see what happens.
What a duel for first. Carl Williams gets a little too close to Al Unser and spins in turn 3. Branson has some daylight now. Dick Atkins loses it. Foyt has caught Andretti and makes a bid to pass. AJ gets him on the inside. Bobby Unser is steady in 4th. Rutherford is still struggling with his stubborn race car. Finally, Branson sees the checkered flag and wins his first Golden State 100. Foyt was second. Andretti finished third and clinched the 1965 National Championship in his rookie year.
All right, let's dive into a little history this week. Favorite time of the show. This week's history segment, we're going to go back to one of the toughest and most respected drivers of American open wheel racing's golden era, and that's Mr. Don Branson. And this is one of those names that if you know it, you know it. Because Branson wasn't just fast, he was relentless. Don Branson was born in 1930, and like a lot of drivers of his time, he didn't come up through the polished ladder system. There were no academies, no simulators, no structured development paths. He built his career the hard way, running local tracks, learning on dirt, and figuring things out race by race. By the late 1950s, he had made his way to the USAC Championship Car Series, which at the time was one of the most competitive and dangerous forms of racing in the world. We know that. We know all about those stats and have covered them in previous episodes. But Branson's biggest success came in the early 1960s. He won the 1963 USAC National Championship, and that wasn't just a fluke. He backed it up with another title in 1964, making him back-to-back champion in an era where consistency was incredibly difficult to achieve. Across his career, Branson scored 7 USAC Championship car wins, those 2 USAC National Championships, but the numbers don't fully tell the story here because a lot of his success came on dirt tracks, mile ovals where cars moved around constantly, grip changed every lap, and drivers had to be completely in tune with their car, and that was Branson's strength. He was known for smooth, controlled, incredibly tough to beat on those surfaces. Like every driver in that era, though, the Indianapolis 500 was always part of the story, right? So Branson made multiple attempts to qualify for the race in the early 1960s. He qualified for the 1964 Indy 500, finishing 23rd after dealing with some mechanical issues. But his career at Indy never quite matched his success on the championship trail, which wasn't uncommon for drivers who specialized on dirt. Still, just making the field in that era was an achievement on its own. So let's talk about the risks of the golden era, and this is where the story really takes a turn because you can't talk about drivers from this time without talking about all the danger. Racing in the 1960s was unforgiving, minimal safety equipment, open cockpits, tracks offered very little margin for error. In 1966, during a USAC race at Ascot Park, Don Branson was involved in a crash that ultimately took his life. He was just 36 years old. Branson's legacy is one of grit and consistency. He wasn't a headline-chasing driver, he wasn't flashy, but he was effective. He won championships in one of the toughest eras of American open-wheel racing against deep fields and under conditions that demanded total commitment every single time out. And he did it by being steady, by being smart, and fast where it mattered. So let's talk about why he still mattered. Well, drivers like Don Branson represent a different kind of racing history, one where skill had to adapt constantly, survival was never guaranteed, and championships were earned the hard way. He may not be the most talked about name today, but his impact on the sport, especially in the USAC competition, is undeniable. And that's Don Branson. I mean, that's who he is. We remember him for that, and we appreciate everything he gave us and gave to the sport. That's this week's history segment, and that's going to do it for, episode 83 of Historic Hot Laps. Can't believe we're already here. 83, and we're going to be in triple digits by the end of the season. It's going to be wild. This one really felt like a snapshot of where motorsports is right now, though. On one side, you've got Formula One, fast, technical, precise, but still trying to figure out how to bring the racing closer together under those current regulations. And on the other, you've got weekends like Rockingham, where tire wear, track character, and a little bit of unpredictability still creates moments that feel raw, they feel real. And then there's the Indianapolis 500 sitting out there on the horizon with a field that's almost full but not quite locked in. We're one entry away from real pressure. One entry away from bump day, meaning everything again. So keep an eye on that because it's going to shape up the entire month of May for all of us. And of course, we took a look back at Don Branson, reminder of just how tough this sport used to be and how much respect those drivers still deserve. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to follow, share with someone who loves racing, and please come back again next time. We're doing this every week. We've got a lot more to get into as the season keeps building. Until then, take care. We'll see you on the next lap. Stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.